if there are repeated words in the options in an item, then it's best to check if we can put those words into the stem. I would, and then I hope was one item last week, which is a lot of repeated, again, redundant. So
Right.
what you said about writing the table of contents being very redundant, and it also applies to item writing. And this is a general rule that whatever you can squeeze into the stem is best, because then you don't need to write those very same words out again in the options. And
what's the stem?
The original sentence in the sentence.
Oh,
So we have that in the multiple choice question, for example. And then we have the options, also known as, well, the answer itself and the distractors. And it's not good practice to, first of all, to have items that are very different from one another, but it's even worse when you have three items that are repeating the same words, and then there is one that doesn't, and we've seen examples of that.
right.
So in that case, you'd have to rethink entirely, like, first of all, what is it testing? Can you make sure that all four have the same format? And if so, then you'd remove bits and pieces and you'd squeeze them into the stem itself. So yeah. I wish I could show you an example of this, because that always helps, but there were so many pages as well of this one. Okay, here is one. I went to get a good seat. I went to get in shape. I went to start a career. I hope to be a teacher. Hope to be a teacher is clearly standing out. We've talked a lot about how, so then we'd have to rethink it, always coming from a place of, what am I trying to test here? Just to gain some construct validity. And 21 is similar, because in that case, all four of them are starting with I intend to plus infinity, although not fully homogeneous, because the first two are with go and the third isn't, and the fourth is again. So this would have to be tidied up just in terms of form itself. Yeah. And yeah, just to wrap up, I had this general comment that about validity and writing items in general a bit more consciously, how you need to be clear about the target language. You need to be, well, you know, the scope of your target language again. So if you've taught auxiliaries, model auxiliaries, but not the ones that you're including even in the distractors. So even in the wrong options, that's not cool. That's not good practice. Everything that is going into the distractors as well should, vocab and grammar, should ideally be coming from the original context. So that means no movie stars and vomiting your notebook or what. So just random stuff, above level, below level, and irrelevant language, like the shoes must be prosecuted, shoes must be. So yeah. So again, just follow through even in the detectors is good practice. And beyond thinking carefully of what my target language is that I'm trying to test, so that I don't accidentally test something else, or that I don't test overlapping target language, like we saw with the tag question, where there are 2 plus infinitive and situation going on parallel. We also need to think carefully about whether we are trying to test meaning, form, pronunciation, or appropriacy. So the MIFPA acronym stands for item writing as well. And if it's if we're trying to write meaning-based items, which would be much better if it wasn't 99% form like it is here, and it often is, then we'd usually need a bit more context, and we'd have to embed things better into some sort of a bigger chunk of language and slightly bigger co-text. And we also talked about item types and how and why multiple choice is overused, and how the freer an item is, the trickier it is to think carefully about its validity and what the learner is likely going to answer, how measurable it is, how we can prompt them to write more than they are likely going to write, and things like this. And one more comment that I didn't mention last time, or I didn't even put in the notes, I think, is how validity shouldn't depend on current affairs
Right.
either, because yeah, there were a couple items with COVID and Italy and restrictions, and if at the time of writing those were true, but they aren't today, then again, it's not a fair item, is it?
Right.
And layout consistency was important. We talked about that concerning lesson planning and just in general in materials writing, but it applies to item writing as well, because if you write a new rubric just for one question, which was the case, I think, with at the very end of one of these, well, this 35 is kind of, so it's in part 2, and for part 2 we already had this instruction, write an appropriate answer, and we commented on how the word appropriate is problematic. So and then we write the quasi new rubric.
Are we testing their geographical knowledge or their English ability, or what? I mean, they probably know what Australia is, but what if they confuse it with Austria and then they write, they speak German in Australia? That's good English, it's bad information, but I mean, what are we testing here?
Yes, that's a very good point as well. I didn't notice this, because then again, I'm not so familiar with the book itself, either. So, but
they
it doesn't say.
I was just going to say that I'm sure there are people that speak Aboriginal. I don't know how many languages they have there, but maybe whatever the language is of the Aboriginal people.
As well. So
yeah.
I'm loving how conscious you are becoming of what can go wrong with an item or with an answer, right. And how then validity becomes a question, and as well. So that's a spot on comment. I wasn't going there. I was just thinking on the rubric, as well, how you must use the passive voice other than compelled speech and force feeding and form-based and all the other problems. It's a new instruction, and then this is a layout.
Okay.
About layout, how you need to be a bit more principled. Just okay, well then, if you want a completely different kind of question, put it in a new part. If you're kind of clumping different item types into different sections of the same test, so that's just not very consistent. And that's never good. Yeah, and then I didn't comment on the other book because I didn't have time either.
Right,
but
that's okay.
Yeah, I didn't have units 1 to 6, and I kind of tried to start, and then I realized that I didn't have it, and it was a relief because I was so out of time. But at the same time, it made me realize that I want to comment on this, that you can always, and you should always, comment on a material or even items based on the actual syllabus. So although I do see a lot of issues with these items that were allegedly written to test units 1 to 12 from this book, I really shouldn't go ahead and comment on all of them.
Either I forgot to I remember choosing not to include units 1 through 6. Perhaps I think the test might have actually been on 7 through 12, but
Okay.
I'm not sure. Either way, there's a mistake there on my part, one or the other.
And it helped us. How useful is it? Because it helped us kind of talk a bit about this, that we shouldn't ever assess an item without considering what was happening in the book, what was taught, and what it is trying to actually test. So thank you for making this mistake to help us think about it. Because I was just about to kind of go in, guns blazing, to tear these items apart, but then I was like, it's not responsible, because I wouldn't know if prosecuted vomit was taught, in the or whatever nonsense, and in vocab terms as well. So I have a hunch that a lot of recurring issues would still apply, but the responsible thing is to always look at the material and then judge the items that were written to test it.